This is the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. Kane and Olgun here on a Tuesday as we get ourselves set for Game 4 of the NBL Championship Series. Melbourne United, they have the edge right now, Olgun, and of course, a home court disadvantage coming into play so far in this series. We're going to break down everything we have seen, but let me say this off the top. I am a little bit sad today because this is, no matter what happens in Game 4 or for a neutral, hopefully a Game 5, this is the last podcast we're going to do where we can speculate about who could win the title and who's going to win the next game. So I'm feeling a little bit sad about this. I love this league. I love having fun with you every week and getting stuck into each other and trying to break down things that we thought we've seen and different things going on in the game. So it's always a lot of fun with you. And so far, I would say this series, we'll get into it, but I think it's living up to the billing. These are two really competitive teams that are ultimately playing out a little bit of a dogfight of a series, it feels like.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if you feel the same way. It feels like the season has gone really, really quickly.
Yeah, too quick.
Like it feels like it was only
too
a
quick.
month ago that.
And I say this it's gone too quick. And I say this as someone who doesn't necessarily believe they should extend the games. I think it's a good thing to get to the end of the season and be wanting more. But anyway, please carry on.
Yeah, again, it's probably for another time. But yeah, I think the games should be closer together. I think that you've got to figure out what to do with that FIBA break there. There's like a lot of tweaks that you can make to it. But yeah, it feels like this thing has gone so quickly. And then you get through a whole semifinal series where every home team wins, and then you get to the championship series where no home team can get it done.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. And we're going into this Game 4 where I'm thinking, what do I want? You know, it was really enjoyable and unique, but it was awkward being around and absorbing the reaction of the Jack Jumpers in John Cain Arena. They had this section, as always, and they were really loud. And obviously the adulation was there and very real. But the idea of covering a team winning the championship on their home court would be very cool. So whether that happens in Melbourne, whether that happens in Wollongong a few days later, for me selfishly, that would be a really cool thing to cover because I wasn't able to do that last year. But also this thing has been so close. So there's no telling who's going to win this game. There's no Melbourne's at home, therefore. That's not how this series is working.
Yeah, we discussed this last week when it was just 1-0. And I do want to shower some love on Melbourne United here because I do think last week when we podcasted, you know, a lot of it for me felt like, hey, man, Illawarra has a lot to feel positive about, even though they go down in this series. Now, they did come back and square things up. But Melbourne, to me, if you look at these two teams, Melbourne is the team that has taken the opportunities because there's just been opportunities in games to grab it. And to me, this is where Illawarra is going to walk away and regret it if they can't turn these things around. They are probably already regret that they're down 2-1 in this series because I know they hit the game winner at JCA in Game 2. But that felt like that should have been a game that they had already in the bag a few minutes earlier. It should not have got to that position. So to me, Melbourne has grabbed all the moments. They've got a ton of experienced guys. And so I want to shower some love on this team that has just got the job done so far, and particularly on the road in 2 games, both scenarios where you thought, damn, they're in big trouble here, double-digit deficits in both of these games. So I could go to a number of areas here. I want to ask you, who is one player for Melbourne United that you want to zero in on first, if there's one guy? Because there's been a number of heroes for this team.
Look, let's zone in on Delhi.
Yep.
First off, he was the story of this game. You know, the thing about Melbourne, and when you speak with other teams throughout the season, they say similar things, which is you can't give them an inch. Right, in the sense of, you know, you give Chris Goulding a centimeter and he'll be able to get the shot off. You make one defensive error and they're able to exploit it. That's what this team is in this series. Both from like a granular perspective, if you throw a coverage at them and they find the way to exploit it. If there's a mismatch and they exploit it. If you aren't able to run a score up against them, if you can't get out to 15, 16, 18 points, if you're stuck on that 10-point advantage, they're going to come back. Like, if you don't put them to bed, they're going to figure out ways to come back. And so that's what Melbourne United does so well, because they're so organized. And Delhi is the head of that snake. And you watch him out there, and the way Delhi plays is not attractive. It just isn't, right? It's very, his head is down. He's pounding the ball. Like the way he, jumps on loose balls, right? It's very it's very rough, right? But it's so smart. Delly knows exactly what's happening at all times. He is watching the coverages that the Hawks are throwing at him, and he's telling guys to be in certain spots based on those changed coverages. His ability to recognize mismatches and exploit them. His ability to get the ball to either Chris Goulding or Ian Clark or the big who's slipping to the rim on the money. Like, he's the guy who is guiding this offense. Dean Vickerman and that coaching staff have them running creative stuff, and the gravity of Chris Goulding and Ian Clark is very, very real. But to have Delly as the brains of the operation just means that Melbourne United are just always going through their processes. You just know that they're going to get a good look, or at least like get through a process to probably find an advantage at some point in a possession. And I put I put so much of that down to Delly's IQ and just his ability to find guys and exploit mismatches.
Yeah, we go back to game one in the series where he took those 6 or 7 shots early in the series, and we've discussed it a little bit. I think at times we've seen, and I almost feel like I've been a little too harsh. Sometimes in games where he goes into that scoring mode, we've seen it during the year where this Melbourne team, let's face it, they've gone through the motions a little bit. They have been prone to taking bad shots. But the thing with Delly, he's really put that away. Outside of legitimately the first 5 minutes of this series, he's been awesome. And even if you don't believe early in games that he can hit all those shots, I'll tell you when he hits them. And when I believe he's going to hit them, it's in the final 5 minutes of the fourth quarter or in overtime. He just hits the shots. He did it against Perth late in the game on the road. He did it in this game here. And he does it because what you said, he might not be a traditional threat where teams are scared about him on the perimeter, but he is definitely a threat in pick and roll scenarios and when he gets downhill. And he got the floater that basically iced this game, and he got it because Sam Froling and the other Hawks defender who was at the 4, I'm not sure who's in that closing lineup, I can't remember, they didn't want to leave their guy because they knew that he was going to throw that lob. So he put them in a position where they're going, well, he's got 11 assists. Like, we have to respect this guy, but he can also knock down that floater as well. Delly has just been so awesome. And if you look across the league, I was thinking about this as I was setting up the equipment here to get this podcast done. He is, maybe Taron Armstrong is the only other guy, but Delly is the only pure point guard, traditional point guard in the league. Like, is there another guy from the starters? Because everyone else is a scoring guard, whether it's the Illawarra guys, whether it is Kendrick Davis, Bryce Cotton, who you can say he plays the 2, but he plays the 1. He's got the ball in his hands all the time. Jalen Adams, the whole league. Delly is the only one. And it does make me wonder as I look at this, are you allowed to talk about who potentially might win the MVP, or because you got a vote?
I have a vote. Like, I should probably abstain, but you go ahead.
Well, to me, it's a toss of the coin between Delly and Ian Clark. Like, I think that's clearly the discussion who would be the MVP if this series ends right now. I don't think there's too much disputing that. And then it does make me think, and this is getting way ahead of ourselves, but it does make me think about Melbourne and all the discussion about what Delly would do and how much he's worth. It doesn't really matter what this guy does during the regular season, because when they've got down to the biggest games, he's been worth every single damn cent that you can pay this guy. And he's not that old that he can't do this for a number of seasons. Delly's been awesome. He's a legend of the sport in this country. And Melbourne's not winning this series if it's not for Delly. So kudos to him.
So two things on that. The first is on the Delly contract. I think there's an agreement league-wide that Delly is awesome now. I think where teams are getting cold feet is giving him a multi-year deal, because it's a bit scary if you get to the third year of a 3-year deal. That's a substantial amount of money. Delly would be 37 at the time. That's a scary prospect, right? For anybody, I've said this before, if you're going to put trust in someone, it's probably Matthew Dellavedova. But it's scary to have a 37-year-old who would be making like 20% of the salary cap, right? That's just a tough thing for a team to buy into. To your point, if you're Dean Vickerman, you look around the league, and there are point guards who are more talented than Delly, right? Parker Jackson Cartwright, Kendrick Davis, you mentioned Bryce Cotton, all these guys. Would Dean Vickerman rather any of those guys over Matthew Dellavedova to run his offense?
I don't think so.
The answer is just an obvious no. And that's like the value of Delly. And in that possession you're talking about, that floater, it's the gravity that everyone else is absorbing, but it's also Delly recognizing who's in front of him. Tyler Harvey was in front of him. And he knows that almost at any given moment, he can blow by Tyler Harvey. And he did that little spin move, turned Tyler Harvey around, hit a floater in the lane, game over. And like that's Matthew Dellavedova. He did a few possessions before. He saw Todd Blanchfield on him. Okay, I can attack this guy. Gets to that elbow midi. He's recognizing these mismatches and he's exploiting them. He knows where his team's advantages are and he's going right at them. It was a Delhi masterclass in this game. 16 points, 11 assists, 0 turnovers. And I think Jack White said it in the press. The amount of attention and physicality that he absorbs just by nature of being in that position in a championship series game for 35 minutes, to not turn the ball over once is so impressive, especially given how often he's driving to the rim and driving into traffic. So this was a Delhi game. This is what you pay Delhi for, to be able to grind out these sorts of games for you.
Yeah, he is in incredible shape. I'd say, arguably he's in better shape now than he was 5 years ago, even when he was in the NBA. We know he went through some stuff there, and he's made some changes to diet and those types of things, and he's discussed that. So say what you want about 2028 and all that kind of stuff, but I would say this guy's, if we know anything about this guy, he's going to be putting himself in the best possible position to play for as long as he can. So I just wouldn't be too worried about that. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. He has just been so good.
He before the game, so in the hotel before the game, I was behind Delhi in line to get coffee. He ordered 2 iced long blacks, and I imagine they're both for him. But the prospect of downing two coffees directly before a game is crazy behavior to me. But that's how Delhi gets wired, I guess.
He is he's a different beast. There's no doubt about it. You described the way that he plays basketball and that kind of stuff. We love it. So ultimately, for Illawarra Hawks fans as well, who are probably feeling a little bit anxious about the position you find yourself in, I want to talk about the Hawks and things they can change a little bit later on this podcast. But I want to keep with Melbourne here. And I mentioned the other guy that was in the MVP conversation right now. I think if it was a 3-game series and it was done, it would, split your votes, do whatever you need to do between Ian Clark and Matthew Dellavedova. So with Ian Clark, it's interesting. I believe it was a Brisbane game. This is off the top of my head during the regular season where, it kind of just felt like Clark was in cruise control for most of the season. And then he just went ballistic. And all of a sudden, this Melbourne offense looked like they were completely different. And I said something on the show along the lines of, if Ian Clark is playing anywhere near to the level that we know he can offensively in terms of being aggressive and being a threat, this Melbourne team almost feels unbeatable because of what they can do defensively. And over the course of the season, he's at 14 points per game. In the playoffs, including the series against Perth, he's up to 22. And the minutes have clearly gone up. But this is just further evidence that, again, big-time players in big-time games, he's there. And I'm not saying that Melbourne don't desperately want Shea Ili back and he's not so vitally important for this team. But I thought Ili was critical in the Perth series because he was a guy that would devote 100% of his attention to stopping Bryce Cotton. But I do think it's been a little bit underrated that the secondary defender for this Melbourne United team that is equally as disciplined and equally locking down, whether it was Bryce Cotton in this series, Tyler Harvey, who in the first 7 minutes of this game did not even sniff the basketball because Ian Clark was on him. This guy's doing a whole bunch of scoring. But his ability to be a threat offensively for this team in the half court, that everyone is terrified of his shot-making ability, but then also provide defense that, quite honestly, is not that far off what Shea Ili has done in the postseason as he's ramped up. The defensive stuff tells me that I think this Melbourne team is better with Ian Clark starting and playing 35 minutes a night than Shea Ili in this particular matchup.
I'm so glad you mentioned the defense too, because that's what makes Ian Clark different from other high volume 2 guards around the league. You compare him to think of like a DJ Vasiljevic, even a Bryce Cotton. These guys who can get points on the board, even Chris Golding, they get points on the board, but defensively, these are guys who you either have to hide or they're not going to go and guard the primary offensive guy. Ian Clark was top locking Tyler Harvey the entire game. Tyler Harvey was 0 of 7 from 3. He was doing figure eights on the court trying to get open. Like Ian Clark did an unbelievable job, and I thought Clark missed a lot of easy looks on the other end. Maybe there's like a fatigue factor as part of it. I think he just missed the easy looks, but he was getting good looks. That step back 3 that he hit early in the third quarter felt almost backbreaking. It was almost like, like here comes Melbourne United, here comes Ian Clark. But the ability to have someone And Tyler Harvey's another example, someone who is going to give you a ton of points generally offensively, but defensively he's not someone who's going to go and guard the Tyler Harveys of the world. And the fact that Ian Clark can go and do that is so impressive. There's a good argument that the team is better with Ian Clark on the floor than Shea Ili because he gives you, I think, way more offensive juice, but still enough defensive pop that they can still, do their thing. But I wouldn't be surprised if Shelley comes back next game and comes off the bench. Maybe he is like the creator, initiator that they bring off the bench and ease into it. That wouldn't surprise me at all. I think use this momentum into the next game. Use this form that Ian Clark's in right now, especially shooting the ball. Man, I'd lean into that.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the box score as you mentioned that. So I don't want people to get it. I don't want people to mistake what I'm saying here. Like they would love Shea Ili, but I'm just saying in this match,
Shea Ili is the best defender in the NBL, and it's not. It's sometimes not close. Like we all agree on that.
That's exactly. But I just think if you're looking to loosen up this Illawarra defense, that they're significantly more dangerous with Ian Clark on the floor, with Chris Golding and an aggressive Jack White, who we should get to now as well. So I asked after game one, and I kind of thought, no, he won't do it. But I asked you whether you thought, Rob Lowe would go to the bench and Marcus Lee would start. That was another move that Vickerman made. Now, Marcus Lee can't stay out of foul trouble, and that's part of the problem why he probably doesn't start all the time. But there is just a significant difference with Sam Froling. When we get to Illawarra, we can discuss it. But when he sees Rob Lowe on the floor, he's like, man, I'm getting easy buckets here compared to he seems a little bit more hesitant with Marcus Lee. Jack White is interesting because I've discussed the body language stuff all season long. It's interesting. I don't know the background enough to dive into why is this the case, but he does seem like a player that lacks confidence when things don't go his way. And so coming into this one, there was a big question mark. And I asked Copes about this on Nothing But Net because getting a player's point of view on this is so fascinating to me. Like I can sit here and speculate, but I don't know what it's like to have a stinker and then have 4 days to think about what's gone down. And Copes just said, I would take him for a coffee and tell him that I don't give a crap if you're missing 10 free throws, but we need you getting to the rack. We need you getting on the glass, and we need you having an impact because as soon as you become aggressive, the whole offense changed. And even though he hit a few shots in the first quarter, the second quarter, I noted it down. He had a catch in the right corner. He could have shot the three. He pump fake, put the ball on the floor, and scored at the basket. And Illawarra immediately called a timeout. And I was even then watching, and he still just looked like no emotion at all. And I'm not saying he needs to be screaming. We've seen him be an emotive basketball player. But he got to the rack, and then out of the timeout, he scored 2 times in a row. And one time was on a backdoor, easy layup. And then all of a sudden, he took a step back, like crossover into step back 3, knocked it down. And then all of a sudden you could see he started like talking a little bit and he was giving a little bit of shit like left and right. And I was like, all right, Jack White is back now. It's just so funny how quickly this can change. But that would have been a really tough hurdle for him to get over. And he just got it done. And credit to the team for getting him involved, particularly on that first possession. But they were looking for him. And he does look like the type of guy that needs some help. But credit to him. That was good to see him get over that hump.
Yeah, I spoke to a lot of people before the game, and there was just like an obvious sentiment of, hey, like, what do you think Melbourne's going to run their first possession? Like, they're going to run something for Jack just to get him a look of some sort. Just get the ball rolling, basically. And I spoke with Jack a little bit before the game, and he seemed fine. He's just generally an overthinker. And I think when United gets him going early,
respect that,
and gets him
relate.
and look, most people can.
Yeah.
When United gets him going early, I think you can sort of get the monkey off his back a little bit, and you're not thinking as much, and then you're just like in the momentum of the game at that point, right? You're just sort of like rolling with the punches, and I think that's when he's at his best. And then as the game went on, we saw him get up for some alley-oop. I think he ever dunked one, but he laid in a couple. Yeah. I think he started to get a bit more like aggressive and angry in the way he played, which is what I think that's preferable for United as opposed to the overthinker who hesitates and things like that. Like he was huge. He had 20 points. He had 8 or 9 from the field, hit 3 threes. The step back 3 on that left wing was huge. There was a trail 3 he hit as well in the fourth quarter. I think like this was like a really impressive bounce back game. It's like going the time between these games is a killer. Like you speak to any NBL player and they'll tell you, man, I hate when I have a bad game on a Sunday, and then our next game isn't until next Monday. It's like, man, I've got to stew on this for 8 days. So a 4-day break between games is atrocious. That feels horrible if you're a player who's just trying to get into their next game. To be able to like get through that mental hurdle and then get into this game, hit the first shot, and then rally on from there, super impressive.
Yeah, very impressive. That trial 3, again, that was Daly who pushed the ball ahead. He got to the free throw line area and kind of just waited to see what was developing. Jack White was trailing. He knocked it down. And after that, you could see on the broadcast, the camera was a little bit slow getting to it. But you looked like he went... Yeah, it looked like he bumped into him a little bit. And I was like, all right. I'm like, Jack White's back. He's feeling good. So, this is an 83-77 ball game, Olgs. Like, to have 20 points on 8 for 9 shooting in a game where scoring is really difficult, like, it was massive for this game. And, we'll still wait and see what version we get in the next game. But, title on the line in game 4, you get to go home. No better opportunity for him to bring some of that emotion and get to the basket early. And he should be a physical beast. Like, he is too much of an athlete not to be. And obviously we've seen it for a variety of reasons. I think they mentioned in the broadcast now, I think he's 6 for 18 from the free throw line. So I understand like why there might be some hesitation, but we saw him get to the basket and score over and around this Illawarra defense. He's a threat. He's a threat when he gets the ball.
But it lifts him defensively too. We saw Jack White on Sam Froling minutes. Yeah. And I think, and Dean Vickerman mentioned it in the presser that we wanted Sam to catch the ball further out and get him to put the ball on the floor against like a pestier, more mobile defender in Jack White. And I thought it largely worked. I thought Jack White had enough physicality against Sam Froling, and I thought the mobility was really solid there. That was a good change of coverage from the United coaching staff too.
Hey, let's chat Illawarra. A good transition point for this might be, and I'll ask you, as you've been around it and you got your boots on the ground there with all the news that's going down. So first thing I will ask is Trey Kell obviously exited this game in the fourth quarter. Where is there anything around with his health and availability? I assume he's okay, or I certainly hope he's okay.
So he got scans on Monday. I don't know the outcome of that yet. I think I'll say this. There's a reason why no physio or no doctor ran out onto the court. I think they think that he is fine. Yes, he was down. He was holding his knee for a solid minute, sort of writhing on the floor. But he did walk off under his own power. So again, I don't know the outcome yet, but I'll say there's a reason why a physio wasn't quick to run out onto the court there.
Okay, so the follow up to that, and that was a really important stage in the game. So Justin Tatum, obviously wasn't thrilled with the process from the officials there. And for those that perhaps need a little reminder, so there was an incident in the third quarter where Daly just falls over. I don't really know what happened there, but he fell over. And
so Trey Kell had fallen over like 2 seconds before, and then Daly clearly slipped on the wet spot.
It looked like he slipped.
That was a result of it.
But the interesting thing about this is that I thought watching in real time that it was just an inadvertent whistle, because the way that he went down looked like he got fouled, right? And then I was like, oh no, he actually just fell over, slipped over, whatever it may be. So they stopped the game immediately, which is interesting in a live possession. We see guys go on the floor, and we do see from time to time that they will stop it. A lot of the times that's normally when it's under the basket and you've got a bunch of bodies there, they might blow the whistle. But they stopped the game. And Chris Reed, the official, his reasoning was very clear. He said, look, we're stopped for player safety. Fair enough. The Trey Kell one was interesting to me that they didn't stop the game. So Justin Tatum was very upset about this. Again, Trey Kell just kind of slipped, missed his foot hitting the ground. I don't really know what happened driving to the basket. They didn't stop the game, even though the loose ball actually went to Chris Golding, Chris Golding almost had to hop over Trey Kell to move up the floor. So it was definitely in the vicinity. They didn't stop the game. And then Illawarra's in the penalty. Maybe they could have tried to defend 4-on-5, but they fouled. Obviously, one of their key players was down on the ground, and that gives them 2 free throws. It's a 4-point game. I will say this. I think it was totally understandable that Justin Tatum was angry in the moment, because as I was watching it, I found it pretty bizarre that they didn't have the same treatment for let's face it, a pretty similar incident within a quarter of each other. at a very important stage in the game. I think he actually had a very reasonable case here to be annoyed. And I was a little bit surprised on the broadcast. They couldn't figure out why he was angry, because to me, it was the first thing that popped in my head.
I disagree. The Delhi one was I think pretty clear. He clearly slipped. If you go watch the replay, it was an obvious slip. It was in front of the official. The whistle's blown. No advantage was taken away from either team. If anything, a slight advantage was taken away from Melbourne. But that happened. That is commonplace. That happens all the time. A player going down and getting injured, and then another team starting the break. I don't know if we've ever seen a game stopped in that sort of capacity. The only time I've seen that was in last year's semi-final series, which was Illawarra versus Melbourne, and there was a slippage at half court, and Sam Froling was going for a layup or a dunk on the other end, completely away from that slippage, and Ken Widgeon was there and he blew the whistle, and we were up in arms about that because you obviously can't blow the whistle there. There was an incident earlier in the season where Kelly Laupepe he tore his hamstring and he had to sit on the floor, and the possession was just going up and down basically with him just laying there, right? The rules indicate that you don't have to stop the possession there, and I think it's pretty common sense for if Trey Kell is down on the ground, he has just fallen, he's just gotten injured. Melbourne has the ball. You don't take their advantage away from them if they are on the break. I think it was completely unreasonable for Justin Tatum to be angry about that situation. I will say he should have directed his vitriol toward the fact that Matthew Dellavedova shot 3 free throws because he sort of went into his shooting motion as Wani Swakala-Bullock went to intentionally foul him. Obviously, they were going to foul him. Obviously, he wasn't in a natural shooting motion. The fact that the officials gave him the 3 free throws and said it was a smart play by Delhi, that's something that I think is reasonable to be angry about. And if Tatum was angry about that, I think we would all rally around him and say, yeah, why was he shooting 3 free throws? That's absurd. But I think it is completely commonplace in the NBL for a team to be allowed to go on the break when a player is down on the other end. We see it all the time. Nathan Sobey gets on the rim, falls down. We're going to stop the possession. Can any player just fake an injury so we can stop a transition basket from the other team? That's not how this ever works. And I don't know why that was where Tatum's sort of concern was directed. It should have been directed to Delhi shooting 3 free throws because I thought that iced the game.
Yeah, well, so do I. That's what I'm saying. It's a very important part of the game. But I don't really see that they were that different from each other. Like, you can say, well, Delhi clearly slipped. I don't know what happened to Trey Kell. There wasn't that much contact on the play, so did he slip as well? We see players all the time slip on certain areas of the floor, and the game doesn't stop there. They just let it keep going. So I don't understand why the whistle was so quick on that Delhi play. And you can say that maybe it hurt the advantage for Melbourne that a player going downhill there, but maybe it didn't. What happens if they miss and then there's a transition opportunity and Illawarra scored down the other end? I don't see it as clear-cut as you, and it seemed a little bizarre at that area of the floor. Yes, if there's bodies all around, they blow the whistle. But do I think I'm not saying that it cost Illawarra the game or anything, but I do think all we asked for with the officials, who, by the way, I think have done a pretty good job. They haven't really been a talking point at all.
I agree.
Series. All you ask for, because I think the thing that people get most annoyed about with the officials in the NBL is that they're not consistent, and I just thought it was strange how you can say one was going to take away the advantage of Melbourne. Well, it's potentially could have taken you can't guess what's going to happen down the court. So to me, that's what it was. I don't understand why one was so instant and the other not. So I do understand in a big time game where it's a 2-possession game with 2.5 minutes to go, why he was annoyed by that.
Yeah, I don't know. We want to see eye to eye on this. The Delhi slip in that the Delhi slip. They were in the half court. They're operating.
No, he was near half court. He was near half court. It wasn't like
the possession would be operating from half court and beyond. Whereas the Trey Kell injury happened and the ball was going away. The possession was moving away from where he slipped and where he was laying on the floor. We don't. The player safety is not a consideration at that point until either there's a dead ball or until Illawarra gets the ball and then running toward where Trey Kell fell over. I feel like this is something that is commonplace throughout the NBL. Again, you look back to the Kelly Laupepe situation. The other team, I forget who it was. It might have been Adelaide. It might have been Melbourne. They were running down the other end. Kelly. They asked him to lay on the floor, and even when he did, they didn't blow the whistle right away. Like
that's the whole thing. You can't tell me
guys get injured. And guys get injured, and you allow the possession to go on. You can't just take an advantage away unless it's a head injury.
But that's ridiculous. Like that whole idea. This is what I'm saying. Like the official deciding when it's safe, when it's not safe. If you have a player on the floor that's injured, you can't just make the determination that he was like right under. He was basically at the free throw line. Like you can't just make the determination that it's no big deal. Just keep going. It's not like the teams can call a timeout in live play. Like it's not the NBA where you can actually stop the play and look after your guy. You can't. So I don't know why the officials have that time where they're the ones that are deciding what's going to happen next in the action. But anyway, ultimately it wasn't that big a deal. But I do think that I think Tatum, I think it was understandable why he was frustrated in that moment. And you're right, I don't think we will agree. And you know, I might be in a very vast minority, which wouldn't be the first time. We do understand that. What's your biggest concern with Illawarra, though? Yeah, I mentioned at the start of this podcast that it just doesn't feel like they're taking the moments. And if we go back to a few times during the regular season where Illawarra had leads and they let teams get back into it late, and one of the games was against Sydney where they won, and we discussed it. I was frustrated with how they looked like they were trying to run down the clock. They all of a sudden stopped playing the same type of basketball we've seen in the past. I think we've seen some of that rear its head here in the last couple of games, because the fourth quarters are where all of a sudden this juggernaut offense all season long just can't seem to function outside of being bailed out by Tyler Harvey in game 2.
Yeah, it's a few things. It's one is like Melbourne locks down, and I don't know if the Hawks are able to sort of find their advantages. You've got top locking on Tyler Harvey, and they're trapping him, and then Dabo Hickey's on the floor. I don't know if the lineups are right out there. It feels like Justin Tatum is sort of like rejigging lineups and throwing 5-man groups out there that haven't played a lot of minutes together. He's still trying to find something, but I think it's just like the inability to like really stay in their processes and try to continue to find those advantages. Like Tyler Harvey and Trey Kell, they're going to draw crowds. So the stuff they were getting in the first half, where they'd find those quick outlets to either Froling or whomever, and they'd get good looks because the ball would move. It feels like they lose that in the fourth quarters. Whereas you compare it to Melbourne, and their offense is just in autopilot. They continue to go through their stuff, continue to find the advantages, and they get decent looks. It doesn't feel like the Hawks have like the mental fortitude to stay in their stuff. It seems like they almost get rattled in fourth quarters and aren't able to play the sort of free-flowing style of basketball that they do to start games. And that's the thing. I did a thing yesterday that they're an average of 11 points is what they're losing fourth quarters by. And I think it's, as much as you can say there's a lot of defensive stuff to it, I think it's largely offense. I just think that they're not able to find their advantages.
Yeah, I mean, defensively, I think this has been a fine performance. I mean, this is a low-scoring series. Yes, it's kind of slower paced, but if you look at the way this game started, so Melbourne starts the game 8-0, and then they had a 22-6 run to end the game. So outside of the first 5 minutes and around the last 7 minutes, so it's 12 minutes. So the 28 minutes in between, Illawarra led this game 71-53. And you talk about the rotations for Tatum, and I said it in the last podcast, like ultimately you have to rely on your stars. Like your stars have to be the ones that carry you. That's exactly what's happening with Melbourne. They outside of Tanner Krebs started pretty hot in game 2. They're not relying on random role players to carry them to wins, and it kind of feels like that's what Illawarra is doing. And it's almost like what their strength has been all season long, which has been depth and absolutely blowing teams away. It's harder to rely on that in bigger moments. And there's a reason why some guys are coming off the bench in this league and the other guys are all NBL players. So to me, I'm looking square at the best players in Illawarra and just saying they're just got to be better. Like you look at Harvey and Trey Kell. So those two guys in game 1 and game 3 where they're lost, each 16 points total for those guys. That is nowhere near enough for those two guys in the 2 losses for this team. And that means that Tatum is relying on the bench guys. In the end of the third quarter, where Illawarra finished on a 14-0 run and they got a couple of buckets early in the fourth quarter, that lineup was Ulbrich, Darius Days, Davo Hickey, who we know has played big minutes and big moments, HJ Lee, and then Trey Kell was out there as well. So it's 4 bench guys. And I almost describe those lineups for the Hawks as the chaos crew. Like this is the team that defensively will cause havoc. They will get out and run, and they play on confidence. So when they start knocking down threes, they can blow you away. And against most teams, once they got that 10-point lead with 7 minutes to go, they're probably safe. And 7 out of the 10 teams in the league, they would have just gone ahead and won that game. But Melbourne's not like that. Like, Melbourne's just going to keep grinding you down. They don't care if they're down by 10 points. And I thought Illawarra almost threw the game away when they had the 10-point lead with 7 minutes to go, and they just started chucking wild threes. So they had 4 3-point attempts in a row. 3 of them didn't even hit the rim. One was Trey, Kell, one was Harvey, one was Lee, and there was another one outside of that. So instead of continuing to play the way you're playing, get into your offense, and get a 12-point lead, a 14-point lead, a 16-point lead. Instead, it was cut to 5. The crowd sits down. It was like a church in that building all of a sudden on the broadcast, and you could just sense that all of a sudden everyone's like, "Man, now we're gonna go into preservation mode." And after that, almost every single half-court set was initiated under 10 seconds on the shot clock. They were playing the clock, and they've done it in the past, and that's when they get themselves in trouble. And if you try and play the clock offensively against this Melbourne defense, you got no chance. You just can't score. They're too good. So, I thought they threw it away in that game and in that moment in the fourth quarter, and it was tough to watch, particularly on their home floor.
Yeah, the crowd is interesting. When they're rolling, when the team's rolling, they're loud, but the crowd rides the emotions with the team. And so when they're not rolling, I had someone in the building who was there that night told me, like, they really like soften up a bit when it feels like their backs are against the wall. Whereas there are other teams around the league where their crowds will sort of will them to victory. It doesn't feel like the Hawks are like that, or the Hawks crowd is like that. I thought as much as you can point to the way the Illawarra Hawks operated offensively, the way United guarded, I thought was really, really impressive. Again, keeping the ball out of Tyler Harvey's hands. It looks like Dean Vickerman has put like $100 note on a piece of string, and he's just put in front of like Dave O'Hickey, and he's just saying, "Hey, shoot the ball." We want, if Dave O'Hickey shot 8 3-point attempts, this is a dream for Melbourne United. Yeah. Melbourne United going into the series would say, "Hey, let's make Dave O'Hickey shoot 8 threes." He made his first 2 threes. He missed his last 6 threes, and that's just you're playing into United's hands. If that's how you're running your offense, if Dave O'Hickey is doing that, there's a reason, respectfully, why Tom Coppins was put on in the first quarter of this game and just played free safety, because United doesn't feel like they have to guard Dave O'Hickey. And
that was an awesome minute and a half, by the way. Shout out to him. He had some nice moments.
Running up and down the floor, like on the offensive boards too. But this is it's a weird series where like Dave O'Hickey's being played off the floor, but he's not being taken off the floor. It's really interesting because he does bring other things. There has to be a balance out there. I don't know if Justin Tatum's finding it. There was a moment, I think it was the 7-minute mark in the third quarter, where Sam Froling was taken off the floor. And he didn't get back on the floor until maybe the 3 or 4 minute mark. So he sat for, I think, 14 game minutes was what I said at the time, which is maybe like 30 real-time minutes of Sam Froling sitting. When he is one of your best advantage creators against this team, for him to sit for that chunk of time, I appreciate that your bench was rolling, but that's not the thing that sustains you, right? Mark Daigneault in Oklahoma City talks about you have broccoli and you have candy, right? You can only have your candy for so long. You need to lean into your broccoli at some point. And I don't think the Hawks are doing that. And I think they can exploit Melbourne United, because if you put Sam Froling on the floor and feed it down low to him, he's either going to get Rob Lowe or Marcus Lee in foul trouble, or he's going to draw double teams. And we saw that when they put him on late in the fourth quarter, he immediately drew a double team, found Dave O'Hickey for a backdoor, for a layup. And it just doesn't feel like they know where their advantages are coming, possession in and possession out, whereas Melbourne United does. And I think it comes down to them playing right into United's hands with the coverage that United's throwing at them. And some of the lineups out there, they're just like a little bit janky.
Yeah, the Froling one's interesting. 21 minutes doesn't feel like enough. Overall, the starters, if you just look at the point differential, I mean, they weren't winning with those lineups. And the Froling, I would have liked to see him play more, because he does feel like a guy that in the moments, if they're not running their half-court offense, he is the one guy that's like, throw it into the post and he will be able to get something done. The only counter I would have to that, as I try and justify, what was going down in the fourth quarter, was the fact that before they just started jacking those threes, and then all of a sudden the anxiety started to kick in, Darius Days was kind of doing that anyway. He was 4 for 4 on 2-point shots. There was a couple of possessions where he just put Jack White under the basket. Like it was a dominant little stretch that he had there. So he was kind of doing what Sam Froling would have done. So that's the only thing. And then by the time they had those wasted possessions and Froling came back out there, all of a sudden they were playing that very late shot clock offense, which I just don't think is going to work. But I look at it and I go, for someone like Kell, and hopefully he's healthy and hopefully he comes out there. And, I've been thinking about my take about the slip thing, and yeah, I don't know. I'm starting to get a bit shaky about that, about the thoughts on that. But Trey Kell,
you had a bad take, but that's okay. Everyone has bad takes.
Yeah, I'm starting to just back up the truck a little bit on that one. I'm just thinking about it more, and that's okay. So Trey Kell, he is the guy that he can be the difference for this team. In that game 3, obviously he was terrible in game 2 against Southeast Melbourne, and he just blew the game to bits in game 3. But in all honesty, that's really his only good playoff game that he's played. Like, even in game 2 where they won in Melbourne, he wasn't an efficient scorer. He struggled to shoot the ball. Like, he's just had a really bad playoffs. And if you're trying to predict how a team can win in the postseason, you got to expect that your best players are going to bring something to the level that they have in the regular season, and he just hasn't done it. So when you're asking why is Davo Hickey playing so much, it does make it very difficult in half-court offense because you're almost playing 4-on-5. But I kind of get it because no one's made more defensive plays than Hickey. He is actually a guy that can almost at all times get this team playing at a tempo that is somewhere like where Illawarra has played during the regular season. And in game 2, he came up pretty clutch. He hit a big 3 late in the third quarter. He hit 2 big free throws to kind of help them stay alive there. So I think part of the reason why he's playing so much is because Justin Tatum, he just can't, he can't have faith in Trey Kell right now. So you talk about needing a bounce back game. He is the guy for me in game 4. He's got to show up, and he's got to do it on the road, and he's got to help the Hawks keep their season alive. Because if not, I think they're done.
Man, the idea of a coach not having enough faith in his import, so he has to play Davo Hickey instead is.
I mean,
that is concerning. And look, and again, it's no disrespect to Davo Hickey. Davo Hickey is super talented.
Yeah.
I just think that there are better positions he could be in on the floor. Like, I don't know if I like Davo Hickey in the too big lineup. I think the spacing is just completely shot at that point, if that's the case. The idea of Davo Hickey with shooters, with like a complete offense lineup, I like that. You can push the pace a little bit. He's going to find H.J. Lee. He's going to find Todd Blanchfield and whomever for those threes. Find Darius Days. I think that's probably where the Hawks should lean into. Go into a lineup that is purely offense. Run high on balls and see what you can get out of it. And I appreciate the reluctance to go to those lineups consistently because you lose a lot defensively. Like, there's a reason. Like, as soon as United sees Hyunjung Lee or Todd Blanchfield or Tyler Harvey on the floor, they see targets, right? And they know how to exploit them. You almost have to accept that because if you're not going to win a basketball game, a championship series game in the NBL, if you're scoring 10 points in the fourth quarter, if you're getting 77 points up as a team, defensively, you just trust your schemes and you trust that everyone's going to help each other. But they have to find a way to score the ball, which is crazy to say about a team that over the regular season is the best offensive team we've ever seen. But that's where their issues are right now. So might as well just throw lineups out there that are full blown offense and see if that can jig something for them.
Yeah, look, we talk about minutes a lot, and I'm just looking at the box score, and I know it was not a night necessarily that went well for the starters, but Tyler Harvey, 26 minutes, Trey Kell, 28, Sam Froling, 21. Golding Daly, and also Ian Clark, they all played 33 plus. Like, it's when your season's on the line, I think you got to go down with the ship with your best players. And so those guys have got to play 30 plus. Froling can be a little more matchup dependent because I know that depending on how things are going, I do like it when they go a little bit smaller. But certainly Kell and Harvey. Hopefully Kell's healthy, but yeah, you got to play 35 minutes. You got to show up and keep your season alive because here's the thing: it feels really dark and down for Illawarra now because if Tyler Harvey doesn't hit that shot, this thing's already over. They've got swept after being on top of the ladder for the whole entire season. So it feels like things are down and dark. And what I would say is, in every game this series, they've had a double-digit lead. Like, there has been stages in this game where you're just like, yeah, this is what we've seen all year. Like, this team is an offensive firepower. They can get out and they can run. So they should still have the mindset that they can win game 4. And if you do that, I know no team has won at home yet, but the opportunity to have game 5 at home, like, they're still in this. They have to believe that they can get back in this series, even if it feels down. So I'm so fascinated You talk about the mental response. I thought they were really tough in game 2, even though anxious down the stretch, but that was almost season on the line. They've got to go do it again. It's not the way that I would have predicted that Illawarra gets to a game 5, 2 wins at John Kane Arena, but hey, that's the situation we're in.
Yeah, and they also have to appreciate that the moment it is very tough to close out a game, to close out a series.
Yeah, Melbourne might be nervous,
it's and things just get tight. It's just what happens in closeout games, and it happens in game 5s, game 7s. But for Melbourne United, the pressure of winning at home and closing it out in that moment, again, you appreciate that these are seasoned guys who've done it before, but that's still a really tough thing to do. So this is, you talk about free swings. Illawarra is not supposed to win this game. It is Melbourne up in the series at home, ready to close it out, win the title, right? And they've been there before. Illawarra is not supposed to win it, just by nature of those things. But Illawarra has consistently been the most talented team over the course of this season. If they can just go out there and play like it's a free swing, you can exploit a team that might have some nerves trying to close out a game at home.
Yep. It was a talking point after game 2, chatting with some of the people over here at work about just the idea, what does Melbourne think? There was a half-court shot last year that ultimately cost them a title. Now you had this Tyler Harvey insane game winner. There had to be part of him that was just oh my God, this isn't happening again. But then they got the job done in game 3. So we are in a delicate position here. Melbourne United 2-1. As I said, Olgun, I would suspect, unless something comes up in the schedule, probably the last time we're going to chat until this thing is done and dusted. But you're going to be down in Melbourne. I've said it all season long. Very jealous about that. This league is awesome. This has been a cool series so far. I'm glad that we're able to praise some of these Melbourne veteran stars that are just getting it done. And we'll see what happens in game 4. Maybe we have a game 5. I hope so. I hope this season doesn't end in a couple of days, but we'll see what happens. This Melbourne team has been so professional.
Yeah, and if you ask players around the league, I get that there's a section of the fan base that doesn't appreciate Melbourne because Larry owns a portion of the team, and because it's because it's Melbourne United, right? They're the big city team. If you ask players around the league, they have so much appreciation for the way United goes about their shit because they only care about winning and everything is super professional. They stay in their process. They play basketball the right way, right? It is a beautiful brand of basketball, and again, players around the league on teams across the NBL, across world basketball who are Australian, they watch Melbourne United and they think this is a really cool way to play basketball. So I think we should all appreciate that as well.
Yep, no doubt. So we'll see whether they can close it out on Wednesday night at John Kane Arena. Shout out to everyone that got out to John Kane last Wednesday as well. I said it, Melbourne's been shafted with these home games, but hey, the fans are still showing up, and we'll see if they can close it out. Potentially an NBL title handed out on Wednesday night. If not, it'll be this weekend in the Gong. Olgun will be there as well, so make sure you follow him along the whole way. And one last note from me, if referee Chris Reed is listening, in hindsight, you might have got that one right. But I'm going to go back and look at the film a little bit more, and we'll see what happened. But I still think let the game keep going, boys. But hey.
The refs have been fine this series. They've been fine. They've been a non-story. If JT didn't bring it up, we wouldn't be talking about it because it's a non-issue. That's the way I feel.
Don't worry, Justin, former colleague. I'm with you. I'm with you, man. Even if the ship goes down, I'm still with you. We'll see. Enjoy Game 4, Olgun. This was the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. As I said, the final couple games in this series on ESPN, nothing but net Aussie Hoops Thursday night as well, potentially wrapping it up or looking ahead to a Game 5. So join us there as well. We appreciate everyone listening. We'll speak to you next week.